welcome back to Devils United. Back again with another preview, and I'm with the lovely Craig. Craig, how are you doing today?
Yeah, all good, Maisy, all good. A lot better now. We are safe from relegation, and a bit on the beach. We'll talk about that in a bit, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm sorry, we was literally chatting about Everton backstage out of all
Yeah.
teams, cursing on Daisha. I'm only kidding, Everton fans. If people come at me about Daishy ball, but um. Before we do get into the preview, I'll quickly say hello to people who is in the chat. Good evening, Ensman. Thanks for coming in. Hope that you are well. Good evening, Statman. Hope you are well. Thanks for coming in. He's saying, come on to Bournemouth, of course, being a Liverpool fan. Did you speak Liverpool, just to ask?
Been to Liverpool.
Have you beat them this season?
Beat Liverpool. Yes, we did beat Liverpool, actually, at home. Yeah, I do forget about that away one, to be honest.
Of course you would. Of course you would. But no one was expecting that win of of.
Exactly. And I tell you what a performance that was as well that day. Virgil van Dijk, could have really equalised it, but missed. Mo Salah decided to sky his penalty as well. So, yeah, it was all round a very, very good day. Very good morning.
Well, as well, it was good for yourself, Craig. It was very nice for
Yes.
me to watch as well.
Yeah.
I was a temporary cherry that day.
Yeah. It was revenge. It was revenge after that 9-0 thrashing. But I'm sure we'll get into that because, to be honest, I think maybe that was the best thing that could have happened this season.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, absolutely. And speaking about Liverpool, there's another Liverpool fan in the chat, Rabbit. Hope you're well, Rabbit. Rolling like the 1999 treble winning side. Yes, Rabbit, always, always. But shame that you can never beat the treble 99 team, eh? I have to stop with these Liverpool jokes. He might kill me one day. Hey there, Lockman. Hope you are well. Thanks for coming in. Hashtag Levy out. You know what? I'm Levy out as well after what Daniel Levy was spouting about the WSL. If you want me to be honest, I don't know what you'd
Yeah.
heard about it, Craig, but these are
Yeah, to be honest, Daniel Levy has been horrendous for that football club for so long. It's becoming a bit like the Mike Ashley situation where they have got a magnificent stadium, and yes, maybe he deserves a bit of credit for that. But at the same time, he's holding the football club back, and therefore, it makes sense for him to step aside and let somebody who does have deeper pockets and more emphasis on helping drive Spurs because let's be honest, they are a top six side. They should be competing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. Hey there, Sophia. Hope you're well. Thanks for coming in. Also, you enjoy your show tonight. Ravi has dropped the link in the chat for your channel, Craig. I've also got it as well in the description so people can go and
Oh,
subscribe to
lovely.
it.
Thank you. We're only 37 away, I think, the last time I checked. 37 or 36. Maybe somebody could correct me.
From how many? Is it 7?
From the big 1K.
Ooh.
So,
Come on,
yes.
let's do this then, people. He's on 964 subscribers as it stands. So go and subscribe to Craig if you do. Let's get into the big 1K.
And you know what? I've said something really, really stupid as well. Once we get to that 1K live on air, and if it's before the Everton game, because we are going to do a watch along for the Everton game, I will do it before that game. And it's going to be like a chili crisp challenge or chili gummy bears or chili something. People have to think up what it is. I might just delegate it to Matt and say, look, what do you want to do? But yes, I've been given this task by a bunch of Crystal Palace fans of all people.
Let me guess, was it Rich who was one of them?
It was, yes, it was Rich. Yes. I did see him munching on that crisp and feeling quite ill. You could tell he was not enjoying it. A question come to him. What do you think about the game? and he just couldn't speak. So yes, I'm dreading that. Hopefully, it's not before the Everton game, but I'm sure it will be quite funny. But
We want you to do this chili challenge, by the way, Craig.
yeah, it will happen. It will
It will.
happen. And I tell you what, if it is the Everton game, I'll do it before the Everton game. Um, I just need to make sure that I've got something on standby just to help me.
Milk, yogurt, you need a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Good evening, Niall. Thanks for coming in. Hope that you are well. Good evening, Daz. Thank you for coming in. Hope that you are well. Hey there, Luca. I'm well, thank you. Hope that you are well too. Hey there, Henry. Hope you are well. Thanks for coming in. Hola to you as well, Andrew. Bonjour. I don't know why I'm speaking different languages, but hope you're well. Always good to see you. Maisinio. I like that. That might be my new nickname, to be honest. I quite like it. Yes, and hey there as well to Zoe. Thanks for coming in. Hope that you are well. So we'll get into Bournemouth.
Yeah.
Because I do think they've had a very fantastic season. More, I would say, second half of the season.
Yes. Yep, most definitely. So I think really the story of our season has to be taken in the first 4 games and then the rest of the season. So in the build-up to the start of the season, Scott Parker was demanding more players, more funds. He wanted people through the door. He felt that the side wasn't strong or strong enough to survive. Um, and Maxim Demon did, provide that. He brought in Marcus Senesi in a position which was really our weakness, and that was in the centre of defence. Chris Metham, who hadn't really played much under him, actually started the game against Aston Villa and had a really, really good game. We won that game, but he got his wish, and Senesi come in. Then we had the run of Man City, Arsenal, and Liverpool. Now, from those 3 games, I would have agreed and said, look, we're probably not going to get any points whatsoever. And that's the way it happened. But it was the manner it was done. So the Man City game actually was the best of the 3. We got beat 4-0 at the Etihad, but we didn't really show ourselves in that bad a light. We kept Haaland quiet, and we did okay. We then hosted Arsenal at home, and this is where it all went a little bit wrong, because in the first 10 minutes, we was 2-0 down. We sat back, we let Arsenal play in front of us, they picked us off at will. Scott Parker decided that, that wasn't the right way to go. It was quite clear for everybody to see. And then we went into a bit more of a attacking pose, and we seemed to do a lot better. The Saliba goal couldn't really do much about. And then we went to Liverpool way. We thought, right, okay, this is going to be a really tough game. Liverpool hadn't really woken up at that point this season. They've only really just woken up quite recently, to be fair, and gone on a little bit of a charge. But we sat back the whole game. It was tactically terrible. Scott Parker didn't know what to do. We was warned about this by the Fulham fans as well. They turned round to us, and because I don't know if you're aware, but Fulham didn't really play Mitrovic under Scott Parker, a player who, of course, has been, pretty clinical this season for them, and of course was very, very good last season. And Scott Parker didn't really play him, which doesn't make any sense. But in that game, we were just so disappointing. He just seemed tactically terrible. Just didn't seem to come out at Liverpool. Didn't seem to give him a game. We was 5-0 down by half time, and then the writing was always on the wall. In fact, we was lucky that it wasn't double figures. If Mo Salah had been able to put the ball in the back of the net, we would have looked at our first 10-0 game. Luckily, it wasn't. Southampton has still done 9-0 twice. And then there was the comments afterwards by Scott Parker. He come out and he turned round and he was like, "Look, we're expecting to get more beatings like this. You know, this side's not good enough." Really knocked a young side who had done well to get out of the championship. To be fair, you know, if you look at the talent in that squad, you know, without Scott Parker and with a better manager, I think we would have won that league. I think we would have won
Hmm.
that league because the first, you know, 15 games from the championship, just to go back, you know, we got 37 points, you know, which was a great return. And we just started dipping throughout the season. We got beat by Derby, which was terrible. We didn't beat Peterborough at all last season. Reading at home was an absolute farce where we should have been about 5-0 up against them. Ended up drawing 1-1 and should have really been beaten. Um, but this was the way Scott Parker was. We went 3-0 down against Swansea in one of the last games, a game which, you know, had so much bearing on it. Went 3-0 down and made it difficult for ourselves. We come back to draw that game 3-all.
I
And
remember that game actually.
he's just, to be honest, Macy, he's just not. He was blaming the players for his own failing. You know, he didn't think, right, okay, we've had a bad day at the office. I've sat too far back. Got to look at this, assess this, watch this game maybe when we get back to Dean Court and say, right, okay, I've done this wrong, that wrong, the other wrong. Look at the players. No, he just threw his own team under the bus. Um, I remember I was actually sat in a bar in Liverpool after the game, just waiting to head off. Needed to get something to eat because the food in Anfield is terrible. Sorry, Statman subs. Um, but we decided to stop and have something to eat, and that's there where I heard this. And on the way home, my phone went a little bit crazy because, and in the end, I ended up speaking to Robbie Savage and Chris Sutton about this, and they asked me the question. They said, "Well, what do they do with Scott Parker?" And I said, "Got to sack him. He's got to go. He's got to go." And their honest view was, "Look, he got you out of the championship." But I thought, at the end of the day, if you look at how poorly, you know, we we played in that game, it was the approach, it was the tactics. After that, I was, you know, there was no other option but to get rid of Scott Parker. Gary O'Neill then, and this is really the second part of our season. So 4 games was the first part of our season. The second part of our season, Gary O'Neill comes in, thrown in
Mhm.
at the deep end, never managed a game of football before. Of course, former West Ham and Portsmouth. You know, he had quite a decent career, and of course Middlesbrough as well, where he actually was worked alongside, of course, Jonathan Woodgate, and therefore Woodgate was the man that brought him to the club. So he was thrown in at the deep end, and he got a lot of people moan about this game, and I don't understand it. It was a boring game. It wasn't exciting, but it was a nil-nil draw at home to Wolves. But the best thing you can do after a 9-0 thrashing is to keep a clean sheet,
Absolutely.
erase that issue, and then move forwards from there. So he done that bit perfectly well. You know, there would not be anything worse than, you know, to go into that game and be beaten 3-0. You know, okay, yeah, it's an improvement, but it's still a defeat. So he got a point on the board. The next game, we was 2-0 down against Nottingham Forest. We turned it round. You know, that was 2-0 at half time, turned it round 1-3-2. And then, in fact, from that Liverpool game up to the defeat against Southampton, in which we actually got, you know, a win against Leicester as well, we actually went the longest time out of anybody. Every other team had been beaten within that period,
Mhm.
which is crazy, from Liverpool to Southampton, the Southampton defeat. So he did very, very well. He went on a little bit of run of defeats. I think the Southampton game was poor. It was disappointing. I think the occasion got probably the better of him. It was a game that everybody knew we needed to win because Southampton weren't particularly very good. Ralph Hasenhüttl was there at the time, and to be honest, I'm sure Southampton fans probably wish that he ended the season with them. The West Ham game was very, very unlucky, and then we had two games against Everton before the World Cup break, and I was a little bit worried about this because we had Everton in the League Cup and then we
Mhm.
had them in the Premier League. I thought what they're going to do is they're just going to stay down here, and we might win that League Cup game, but that's not what we're after. We're after Premier League points. We beat them 4-1 in the League Cup, and I thought, right, okay, that's fine, but I think this is a false dawn. I'm a bit worried still about this. And then we thrashed them 3-0 in the league game, and at that point, I turned around and I said, like you say, we were talking about Everton. I thought Everton were dead certs, nailed on dead certs to be relegated from the Premier League this season. I thought they were absolutely atrocious. In fact, you put, Everton against Derby County of last season, or Peterborough United, on that day, um, either Derby or Peterborough would have beaten them.
Mhm.
They were that poor. They were that poor. Um, I think Gary's done an outstanding job. He did go on about a bit of a bad run, after the World Cup had finished, and I think a lot of fans, and I don't get this from Bournemouth fans. A lot of Bournemouth fans were saying, "Oh, he's a PE teacher, a clown," and being really disrespectful to him because it's his first game. Time in management, but he's got to learn somewhere. Eddie Howe, you know, of course, we gave him his first chance, but it was at a lot lower level. You think, League Two football, but then again, that was an even higher pressured job than this is. If it didn't work with Gary O'Neill, we get relegated to the Championship. Fine. If it didn't work with Eddie Howe, we would have got relegated out of the Football League, and this club would probably have died.
Mhm.
Probably would have died at that point. Um, Gary O'Neill, though, has done an outstanding job. He did go on that bad run. I did question him. It was after the Brentford game, to be fair. We went to Brentford away, and that game was very, very poor. Very, very poor performance. Just seemed devoid of some ideas, some silly substitutions. I would say he hasn't got a lot of those substitutions right, before the World Cup as well. And just going back to that, after the West Ham match, we played both Spurs and we played Leeds. And in those games, we actually took the lead. We was 2-0 up against Spurs, ended up getting beat 3-2. 3-1 up against Leeds, ended up getting beat 4-3. And that was 3-1 with 20 minutes really on the clock to go. So he hasn't been perfect. He has made mistakes, but he deserves a hell of a lot of credit because recently, the win against Liverpool, the game for me, which really cemented, against Wolves, we were very good away from home. A little bit of run against the run of play that day, but at the same time, um, we managed that lead as well. As soon as we got into that lead, we managed that well. The game for me, which really, really sparked everything, was not the Liverpool or the Wolves games, was actually against Fulham. So we were
Mhm.
1-0 down against Fulham at home. Um, we was in a precarious position and we turned that game on its head and won 2-1. And then from that, of course, there was the game against Spurs away where we did, the same to them. We won 3-2 at
Mhm.
Spurs.
Yep.
And then of course, the big games and it was always going to come down to these three games: West Ham, Southampton, and Leeds. The West Ham game was probably the least critical of the three because West Ham were, I think they were always going to get out of it. They were a
Yeah.
little bit better than the rest of the teams down there. They beat us 4-0. Of course, the people on Gary O'Neill's back jumped all over him. And let's be honest, that's only a month ago. That was only a month ago, that game. Um, we then went to Southampton and we got a deserved 1-0 win. They did try to nearly equalise at the end. It was ruled off for VAR. It was correctly ruled off for VAR. But to be honest, we were much the better side that day. And against Leeds, we absolutely demolished them. We absolutely tore
Mhm.
Leeds apart. And those 3 games were always going to be critical to our season. Gary O'Neill has managed those perfectly. Okay, the West Ham game, it would have been nice to get a win against them. But of the 3 games, the 2 which were most critical was Southampton away, and of course Leeds, because that really pushed Leeds into it. It was a 6-pointer. If Leeds had won that game, they would have been right behind us, and we would have been in. Well, we would have still been in it. We would have still been in it, but that game was so critical. So that's really the story of our season. I know that I've probably spoken for a bit too long, but that is honestly, I'm so proud of what the boys done this season, and I think hopefully, fingers crossed, with the investment, we are going to go on to bigger and better things next season.
Absolutely, because I know you've got new ownership as well.
We have,
I'm
yes.
not. I'm not. I know. Is it something more like an investment or something? What's got put in, or someone's bought a certain amount?
So we've got a consortium. The consortium is actually part of Kanai Holdings.
Mhm.
They own the Las Vegas Golden Knights as well as a number of the sports teams. And the head of that is a gentleman called Bill Foley. You do have other people as well who are linked to that, including Michael B. Jordan, the actor of course, the Creed movies. So he's also involved. That was quite cool, seeing Michael B. Jordan with, his shirt on, a Bournemouth shirt. It's that sort of stuff only happens in the movies. Let's be honest. We're AFC Bournemouth. We're not. If it was Manchester United, you could understand it. You could say, "Oh yeah, Michael B.
I
Jordan's
suppose you
always
see
been a
Ryan
Man United
Reynolds as
fan."
Wrexham.
Well, yes, that's very true. Yeah, that's very, very true. And you wouldn't expect that, but if Michael B. Jordan supported Man United, okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Big club,
Yeah.
he's watched them all his entire life. Let him off for that one. Bournemouth, wow, yeah. But actually, what they've done is they've really integrated even Michael B. Jordan. There's story. I don't know how true it is. It's been going round the fan base. But Michael B. Jordan went into one of the local pubs just round the corner from Dean Court and went in there and asked the landlady and said, "Why is there not much Bournemouth memorabilia in here?" And she was like, "The club have never really provided anything." He was like, "Oh, I saw that." And there's a load more memorabilia in that pub now.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So, yeah, I think there's some truth in it. Think there's some truth in it. But of course, there's a gentleman called Jim Favola as well, and he really has integrated and communicated with the fans as well, which is great. Um, they seem very approachable. They seem like a very, very good team, and it's funny actually, doing this preview, there has been talk now about the stadium.
Yes, there is. I've been hearing that because I remember on the last preview that we did, you was. I'm sure you mentioned about like this, like some of the stands are rented because you had to
Yes.
sell them to keep the club afloat. So
Mhm.
you would imagine, especially having the new ownership coming in, that they because without that taken in consideration, the stands is a fairly small football ground.
It
If
is,
you're
yeah.
going to look at revenue, for instance, you're not going to make much revenue based off the capacity of the stadium. I'm sure you're the smallest stadium in the Premier League, so you're going to need to either expand or make a new stadium.
Yeah, so the situation is, as it stands at the moment, is that the ground isn't actually owned by the football club. It used to be, but around about 2004, the club sold it to a company called Structure Dean, and Structure Dean paid, around about 4 or 5 million pounds, which was needed to keep the club going at that point. We did inquire, and this is from what I understand and from conversations I've had. We did inquire, back when we was last in the Premier League, the first season, about buying the ground back off Structure Dean. However, they were asking for too much at that time. But as the time has gone on, that figure's actually gone down, and there's only 5 years left on this lease. So the aim for Bill Foley now is to build a new stadium. He will need to, of course, buy back the old ground, but at a reasonable cost. And the reason why Structure Dean would probably love, I think their view was right. Okay, let's try and build some houses on it. If the club aren't going to buy it back, and it can only be used because the Cooper Dean family years ago, actually, that's why it's called Dean Court, actually donated that plot of land to the football club, and that's why it's called Dean Court. So it can only be used for recreational purposes. It can't be used for building houses upon. Now, whether or not that changes, because what the aim is, and from what Bill Foley has said, is they will build the training pavilion is just behind the actual Ted McDougall stand, which is the temporary stand. What they'll do is they'll build the stadium over that. Plus, they've got the training pitches and part of the car park as well. So that's where the ground will go. Whilst that is going on, of course, we'll be playing in the existing home, but it would coincide, and he's planning really to get that open for the start of the 2026-27 season, which, as you probably know, falls in quite nicely to the end of this lease. At that point, it's up to Structure Dean. Do they want a massive white elephant just sat there that they can't really do much with? Or do they sell it back to the football club for a decent price because they've made the money, you know a lot, well, probably hundreds of times over, because the rent that the football club has paid to Structure Dean since then.
Mm-hmm. Andrew has said as well, isn't there football fields all around there?
There is, yes, there's Kings Park. So that is literally, so as soon as you cross the road from the car park and the football stadium, there's a big park there, and that, of course, that leads up to the pub that I did mention there as well. I don't know whether or not we can build on that land. I think it was mentioned at one point we could do. Of course, this is the second reiteration of Dean Court anyway, this ground. And I don't know if Man United fans realise that. Back, must have been around about 2001, we actually rotated the ground, by 90 degrees, because the old ground was getting quite old. So we played at Dorchester for about half a season whilst that was being done up and being built. So yeah, it's a second reiteration. This ground is really only 21 years old, but it was built on a shoestring of parts that were bought from other clubs. Like I say, like you said, the temporary stand, the Ted McDougall stand, that was put up, and well, that was put up, when we got to the championship, and that therefore. There's not much we can do with the stadium as it seems at the moment. I did speak to Eddie Mitchell on my channel, and he's a former chairman. Do check that out actually, because it's quite an interesting show if you want to find out more about Bournemouth, and also do check out the ones with Trevor Watkins. It's two parts because the story goes into how the club that nearly died the first time. Believe it or not, 2008 wasn't the wasn't the only time this club was on its backside. Whilst you was enjoying winning the Premier League, we was scrapping for survival, and but it's quite an interesting interview, because Eddie Mitchell said that he could have got this stadium up to a significant figure, but I think Bill Foley sees it as, right, okay, maybe we could do that, but what we are looking for is a stadium that maybe is 20,000, 25,000, and then we can build on top. So if we need to go to 35,000, there was talk at one point of a 37,000 seater stadium. That's not
What's
going
your
to happen.
capacity at the moment?
It's 11.
11.
Yeah,
Wow. I didn't actually think it was that
yeah,
small.
yeah. It's 11,000. You imagine if you imagine, some of the stadiums in League One. That is really what we have. Um, Probably a similar stadium to the likes of Wycombe Wanderers, really. Um, but it's a stadium I love. I really, once we do move out, it'll be great to have this shiny stadium, the stability for the football club, something that we can call our own, something that hopefully we'll never sell. Like some clubs have actually sold their grounds recently and done some stupid accounting stuff. Something that we'll never sell, something that we can therefore make us stable for years and years and years to come, rather than having the situation where we are at the moment.
Mhm. Yeah. Honestly, I'd really appreciate all this information because it's definitely something that we don't know, and it's good to learn it all. I do think like like especially in general, but you're very very knowledgeable as well, and I love having you to come on so I can hear more about Bournemouth. So I do really appreciate that,
No,
Craig.
that's all right, Macy. To be honest, it's a crazy story because, of course, I remember watching the 1999 treble, um, and just thinking maybe one day, and that probably
You
not.
know, a guy who I used to work with, if he's
Yeah.
watching my channel, big up to you, my friend. He was actually at Camp Nou, when it was the treble 99, the
Hmm.
Champions League,
Yeah.
and he seen Teddy Sheringham's goal, but then he thought, oh, it's gonna go to extra time, then it's gonna go to penalties, so I'll get myself a drink. Only did he miss Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's goal. I was like, how did you miss it? Oh! I'll say hello to people who as well who's recently
Yeah,
come into
no
the
problem.
chat. Hey there, Talk Forest TV. I'm well, thank you. Hope you are well too. Good evening, Torsen. Thank you for coming in. Hope that you are well. Good evening, Sean. Hope you are well. Thanks for coming in. Hey there, Matato. Hope you are well. Thanks for coming in. Hey there, Twalumbo. Always good to see you. Hope you are well. Hey there, Luman. Hope you're well. Thanks for coming in. Maisie, can we get the FA Cup to the neighbours without playing them? We don't give up without a fight here, Luman. We could win. I'm not hopeful, but we could win. You never know. Like, that's just me, like, being biased when I do say that, by the way, though. I've been watching Bournemouth this season as well myself.
Yeah.
Um, and I must say that I have been very, very impressed with Gary O'Neill. I have actually seen some of the criticism with Gary O'Neill, what you've mentioned,
Mhm.
and it kind of like, it kind of reminds me in a little way like Ollie, the criticism Ollie Gunnar Solskjaer got like with the PE teacher comments and stuff, but I do think that Gary O'Neill, sorry, has done a very, very good job, and I think it's very hard to cut. You said at the start of the season you'd be happy to take 17th,
Yes.
and I think for me is year one is always so hard,
Mhm.
especially a new manager who has never done any football, let alone the Premier League, to find this kind of tactics, to find his best 11, considering he hasn't even made this 11, he's inherited it from a completely different manager. So I'd say it always takes a minimum 12 weeks for a
Yeah.
manager to find their best formation, to find their best players, and build it kind of around around. And the World Cup didn't help either. But I do think that he has pulled off some remarkable um performances, because even one was the Arsenal game at the
Yeah.
Emirates. That was something like, I feel like you was very unlucky with that game. Uh and I do think like, because you were 2-0 up, then you lost the 3-2. I did feel sorry for you, but then you picked up some great performances overall, and I do think for me is, especially now you got this new ownership and you're getting an actual future in place now for Bournemouth to bring yourselves to the next level. You will, year two's going to be the hardest one, because year two's kind of one of them where if you stay in, you'll be staying in here for a bit.
Yeah.
and especially with the new investment, the new ownership, I think you could actually stay as a Premier League club for quite a while.
Yeah, I hope so. I think actually the January business that we did was actually really sensible. And once those players integrated themselves into the side, we really did see them, what firstly Gary O'Neill has done, but also a lot of the transfers are with the aid of Richard Hughes at the club as well. He's got a big say. He does quite a lot of. He's very, very good at what he does.
Mm-hmm.
And Dongo Watara. It's spelled Dango, but Dongo Watara is actually a fantastic player. So he was signed from Lorient. It's a bit of a controversial one actually, because Bill Foley actually has bought a stake in Lorient and then decided to effectively purchase Dongo. So therefore, their fans weren't particularly very happy at that. About that. They are a bit worried that we might go in for Enzo Lafy as well from Lorient during the summer. But he's a great player. But if you look outside of that as well, Matthias Vinya is a good player. He was signed from Roma. Of course, that was when the Zaniolo
Mm-hmm.
conversations come to the fore, and actually I can tell you quite a bit of information about that. It might be better sometimes if you listen to it from Mark McAdam himself, but what actually happened, so the club went over to Roma and inquired about Vigna. They wanted to bring Vigna in. He was the sole purpose for going to Roma, and a representative over there said, "Look, we've got this other player called Zaniolo. Do you want to speak to him?" And of course, they'd be like, no, we're not. He's not going to sign for AFC Bournemouth. Nah, forget it. Um, they pushed them into having a conversation with Zaniolo,
Mm-hmm.
and there was an offer on the table, but Zaniolo decided to turn that down with his agent. Fair enough. That's not a problem. We didn't go over there for him anyway. What actually happened towards the end of the window is that Zaniolo had a second thought because, of course, Roma fans wanted him out the club. They were hoping that he would come to Bournemouth. And in the end, he actually was trying to manufacture the move to the football club. Um, so it's a bit of a crazy one. He ended up in Turkey in the end, but it was, I didn't expect that. I didn't
I
expect
do
that.
rate Zaniolo highly. I think it is absolutely quality, and I don't get
Mhm.
why Roma would let him go. Just because I think he's a very great attacking threat, and I think he's quite versatile because he can play as a striker, he can play as a false nine behind the striker, and he can also play a bit more on the right hand side as well. So I think he
Mhm.
really would have slotted very, very well. It's just about finding his best fit and the best fits for the players around him.
I don't think his attitude really was all there. I don't
Mm,
think it was. I think that's probably one of the reasons why. And the second reason was Hamid Traore. We'd actually moved to sign him up on loan and with a view to a purchase if we stayed up, which now we have. We've actually exercised that because Hamid Traore is an excellent player from Sassuolo. Very, very good player. In fact, I think we was lucky to get him. And of course, Zulu have done very, very well this season. But I think personally, maybe they did need the money, and that was we took advantage of that. So that's another reason why Zaniolo didn't come in the end. But I think part of it was the attitude problems.
you don't really want that, do you, at the football club? To be honest,
No.
especially where Bournemouth are at the moment, is that you want someone who's going to be a great team player, who's going to put that 100% in, week out, and I do think for me, in terms of January, you made some great investment. I think before the season started, I think there was a little bit of concerns for the transfers just because there
Yeah.
wasn't really many coming in. And I think for me, in my opinion, if you're wanting to be a Premier League club, you need to really strengthen that side. Not that Norwich, they're one of them who just come up and down because they don't put the investment that they should do. And
Mhm.
Forest, people look and go, you've overinvested, but you can understand why they brought in so many players as well. But I think for me I think Bournemouth done it right in the end, especially when it come to January, and you got the great players really turning up, like Billing. I think he's
Yes.
been absolutely fantastic. And if you want me, probably you'll disagree with me on it. I don't know, but I actually think he's been your best player this season.
To be honest, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think he's been up there. I think it's really between him and Jefferson Lerma. Solanke's been
Burma, yeah.
excellent. I think Lerma's he's tough tackling. He's a hard player. Um, he does all the dirty work. Um, but he's got an eye for a goal as well. He's a real talent. He was actually the player who started off that win against Leeds.
Mm-hmm.
And he was excellent that day. Absolutely excellent. I'm hoping he's going to stay. I did a little bit of a plea on the channel as well, pleading him to actually stay at the football club. I'm thinking, I've heard, things that make me think he might stay, but then again, how true are those? I don't know. I'd love to see him stay here. But going back to your point about Phil Billing, I think he has been excellent. He's a confidence player.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is one thing about him. Once his head goes, he's not the same player. And, that's something that really does concern me about him. I think that's why he struggled a bit at Huddersfield. I think that's why he struggled a bit in the early days playing for this football club. Um, Against Leicester earlier on in the season. And of course, we won that game, 2-1 win. We was 1-0 down, and he was running around, and he just seemed a little bit devoid. He seemed like there wasn't something quite right that day. Scored, and boom, he's just back to his normal self. So he is one of those. He is one of those sort of players. His play against. If you get the chance to watch it, have a look at his link-up play with Dominic Solanke for the goal against Fulham. It was pitch perfect. It was excellent,
Mm-hmm.
and it was within a minute of that game starting. So Phil Billing, excellent, excellent player. But I think they've all been excellent. I don't think there's one player that has been poor really this season.
Agreed completely. To Ravi's point, I just wanted to say it when he said it's time to move Jones on. It's actually been announced by the club today that Phil Jones is actually departing from Manchester
Mhm.
United. Um, After a decade of service, but yeah, he is actually definitely leaving now. Which it is a shame to lose them Premier League stars, but it's just one of them. You can't keep him on the wage bill either.
No,
You can't just
completely
keep him
agree.
for that kind of value. Oh, one of the only ones left who's won the Premier League. You can't even look at that when you know that. I think Ten Hag said that he's only watched 20 minutes of Phil Jones in training this season.
Yeah.
And that in itself is very, very alarming. Hey there, Lennon. Hope you're well. Thanks for coming in. 3-0 for United. I take that. I take that. Tarzan said a very good point is Gary O'Neill deserves to be on the list for Barclays Manager of the Season, if you ask me. I completely agree with that, and I say that he has been robbed compared to other managers who's actually been shortlisted. I think Marco Silva's done a good job, but
Yeah.
he hasn't done the job what I think Gary O'Neill had to do, because on top of having to get the performances, he's had to build the trust of the fans and the players. He's had to build something what Scott Parker got rid of in a couple of games in the season.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was the point where he took over. The confidence was on its lowest ebb, and he had to pick those players up, and he did that exceptionally well. I was lucky enough actually to meet Gary O'Neill back in late September, it was. And it was just before the Brentford game. And I was quite surprised. What happened was that I took a fan who sadly has now passed away with cancer. I took him down to the ground and we went round. It was all sorted by Steve Fletcher. Um, and Gary O'Neill was there as well. And we sat down with him and had a chat. And at that point, I thought, this guy is very, very good at what he's doing. He reminded me of Eddie Howe in a way, an early version of Eddie Howe. Don't get me wrong, Eddie has, actually transformed over a longer period of time. He's got all that experience now in the bank, whereas Gary O'Neill, has actually he was so astute in the way he was approaching things as well, and he was how meticulously he looks at each of the sides and what they could do. Right, okay, if they do this, we do this. This is how we. Okay, don't get me wrong, it's not always going to play out like that, but I was really impressed by him. And
Hmm.
I think he should be up for manager of the season because considering where we have come from, and it's not because we got promoted out of the championship. I think it's more because Scott Parker left the club in such a mess, and
Yeah.
then he's gradually brought this club through, up, you know, up through the ladder really this season,
Hmm.
and been right. Okay, I've learned from this error against Leeds, against Spurs, and he's getting himself a better manager. The Gary O'Neill now isn't the Gary O'Neill that took charge of that first game against Wolves.
Hmm.
I'm, really impressed with what he's done. Like I say, some of the Bournemouth fans, and I've always been a big supporter of Gary O'Neill since that point because beforehand I'd never met him, but since meeting him and since getting a bit of an insight in what was going on inside his head, I'm right behind him. I think he's a fantastic manager, fantastic man as well. And he's of the Bournemouth mould where a bit like Steve Fletcher, where he will do anything for anybody. So fair play to him. I think he has proved all his doubters wrong, and the amount of grief I've had off the back of this, I've had grief because I've backed him so much. He's gone and proved them all wrong. So long
Hmm.
may that continue.
So I've got the managers of the season up here. Who
Yeah.
would you replace Gary O'Neill for?
Well, I can tell you who I think is manager of the season from those. I don't think Gary O'Neill would win manager of the season.
No, I don't think he would have, but he
Um,
deserves to have that mention at least.
Emery has done very well getting Villa from where they were. What would he have done if he had a full season? That would be interesting. Um, I would say Marco Silva. It has slipped a little bit of Fulham. He has done a good job. I'm not doubting that at all. But I think that Fulham side, had Mitrovic. I think what Gary had to do was a lot tougher than what Silva's had to do this
Hmm.
season. Because Silva knew the players, he's been there throughout the whole season. He didn't have to pick up the
And
pieces
he's
at
had
any point.
massive backing, I'd say, from the ownership to get some outstanding players there at Paulinho, and he's bringing in Premier League players of Dan James on loan, Willian. He's
Oh yeah,
getting fantastic players like that. So I definitely see what you mean about removing Marco Silva. I would have said the exact same choice because I do agree with the rest of them who are on there. I know a few United fans weren't happy that Ten Hag isn't on there, but I do personally think Ten Hag doesn't deserve to be there in my
well,
personal opinion.
Scott Parker would probably agree with Marco Silva being removed as well, because of course he's made some comments about how he wasn't backed at Fulham. He was backed at Fulham. He was backed here as well. Scott Parker just needs to get on with the job and stop moaning. Really, the person out of those that I think should win it, Arteta's done an excellent job to get Arsenal where they are. De Zerbi has been excellent at Brighton, and to be honest, Guardiola, you could argue that he could fall out of this. Yes, he probably will win the league with Man City. Yes, he probably will, win the Champions League. I'm hoping that you can stop him winning that treble at Wembley. That'd be nice. But I think there's one man who's manager of the season this year, and that's Eddie Howe. That's Eddie Howe.
Mhm.
I made a prediction, and in fact, if anybody wants to watch this back, just to make sure that I'm not actually talking out my backside, I actually made a prediction in front of Harry Redknapp, and I said, Newcastle, I think they'll finish third. And I made that prediction because I looked at what they did last season and compared that to, what I think Eddie could do over the space of a year. Harry Redknapp thought I was mad. I put it on Twitter. Newcastle fans thought I was barking mad. Bournemouth fans thought I was barking mad. And look at what's happened. Look at what's happened. I think Eddie Howe has to win it. Or if Howe doesn't want to take the actual award, I'm sure Jason Tyndall will take it for him.
I do think, though, in my opinion, that Pep Guardiola is going to win it because he's going to win the league. It always tends to be people who win the league. But
Yeah.
if I was going to pick from an unbiased point of view, I think Unai Emery deserves to win it. And I think for me is that you're looking at like Newcastle done a fantastic job
Mhm.
this season. I think people were looking at Ten Hag's play. They're looking at Arteta. They're looking at Pep Guardiola. They're looking at Thomas Frank. Nobody was looking at Unai Emery. And then he just started gradually going up the table, further up the table. And nobody noticed what Unai Emery was doing at Aston Villa until he beat Newcastle 3-0. Nobody, and I think he really went on the radar, and I think he's done an absolute fantastic job. And at that point, because Steven Gerrard got sacked, they was in threat of relegation too.
Yeah, completely agree. And Villa, I thought were poor when they come down here first game of the season. It was a game that really was, yeah, okay. You could tell that they were a decent enough team, but were they much different from some of the sides that we played last season? In the likes of Millwall or Blackburn or someone like that. Not really at that point under Steven Gerrard, but Unai Emery's really transformed them. So I can see why you say that. The thing is, the reason for not giving it to Pep is he's already got a very, very good side in place at the moment,
Mm.
which,
And at times, I think it's been quite underwhelming. There's been some games where I actually, especially just before and after the World Cup, I thought, like with Arsenal's form of how they're playing, I thought, bloody hell, these are not going to win the league at this point. Like, just
mm,
because I just think, like, after that Brentford defeat, even Man City fans were saying, we're not going to win the league now. And I think, even though they had done well, they at times they've looked quite poor. And I think maybe that might have been more because they was concentrating on the Champions League, perhaps.
yeah, completely agree. And I think with Man City, let's be honest, they've got Haaland, they've got De Bruyne, they've got Bernardo Silva. They've got talent dotted around that pitch everywhere. Um,
Yeah.
Nathan Ake's come into his own. John Stones looking fantastic this season. Um, there's no reason why they shouldn't be where they are. Jack Grealish, I think Jack Grealish is a fantastic player who, I've got so much time for. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, he's built a side. Yes, don't get me wrong. He's built a side which are, you know, one of the best, if not the best, club side in the world at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
But with the amount of money that he spent, then that kind of pales a little bit more into insignificance. If I went and managed Manchester City, I'm pretty sure that I'd be right up there because I'd have Erling Haaland at my disposal, and let's be fair, unless he gets an injury, you're always going to get a tune out of him. Whereas Eddie Howe, I think, and Unai Emery, and De Zerbi as well, those managers, had these players like Joe Linton. Joe Linton was terrible under Steve Bruce. He was rubbish.
Yeah.
He really turned it on its head. I had Kendall Rowan from the Overlap on my show recently, and she went through all the players. And it's not just Joe Linton; it's Joe Willock as well, Sean Longstaff, all these players who were poor. Who, to be honest, they would probably have driven to wherever they wanted to go, and probably would have been championship clubs because that's what the players there were playing like at that point. Um, that he's actually transformed their careers and got them into a side that are third in the league. De Zerbi's done a fantastic job at Brighton. Actually, untraditional club. They've got very, very good youth policy at Brighton, a very good scouting policy. They're a
I
little
think the
bit.
best in the world at the moment, if you want me to be honest, with Brighton with their scouting.
They are. Yeah, they are without a shadow of a doubt. They are, and what they've got, Brighton, is as soon as Graham Potter left, they knew exactly what they were going to do. They've got contingency plans for every scenario. And I think that's where we need to get. Have we got contingency plans for every scenario? Well, to be honest, the Gary O'Neill situation in during the World Cup, where there was talks of Marcelo Bielsa, or was it going to be Gary? That showed that we didn't. If we had those contingency plans, it would be right. Okay, you're managing the side for this long, and whilst we just go and sort out this bit,
Hmm.
we didn't have that. Um, as it turns out, Neil Blake and Richard Hughes and the appointment of Gary O'Neill was the right one for me. Marcelo Bielsa, there's no guarantees that he would have actually done what Gary did. One manager that I was talking about, and I was saying that if they're not going to give it to Gary, and it was a manager that wasn't actually mentioned at all, but it was a manager that I thought, right, okay, it's achievable. He's an achievable manager to get in. He's got experience in English football. Was Carlos Corberán at West Brom, and of course previously of Huddersfield. And I thought, why not him?
Hmm.
Because if you're looking at Marcelo Bielsa, Carlos Corberán was the understudy of Marcelo Bielsa at Leeds. So therefore, you're getting somebody who will stay for a longer period of time, stay for the project, because Marcelo Bielsa doesn't really do that. Stay for the project, but you're also getting that bit of Marcelo Bielsa as well, because he would have learned from him. He would have learned the approaches. And that's why I thought Carlos Corberán was the perfect person if they weren't going to give it to Gary O'Neill. But they've made the right decision. There was no guarantees Carlos Corberán would have done as well as Gary O'Neill. He might
You
have
never know.
been. Well, exactly. I'm quite
It's
happy
just a
with
big
how it's ended
gamble.
up. Yeah.
It Whatever you do, it's always a big, massive gamble, and it's a risk that has to be taken. And in Bournemouth's case, it has really paid off. And just want to say as well, hello there to Reese in the chat. Thanks for coming in. I've been getting. I had someone in the comments as well wanting me to answer questions, so I'll do a couple of questions before we do wrap up, Craig, if
Yeah,
that's
go for
okay
it.
with
Go
you.
for it.
So what I'm gonna do, it's not gonna be based in order because I do want people to have a fair opportunity. So
Yeah,
I'm
no
doing
problem.
at least one person to ask a question. Just then it makes it a bit more fairer for everybody, really. Um, we'll start off with Ravi's question. Where can Bournemouth create the most? Where create most of their chances in the game?
I think where most of our chances come in are on the wings at the moment. Marcus Tavernier was excellent before he got injured. He was really, really dangerous, but Ryan Christie has stood up to the fold. He's a very, very good player. We've got Dongo Atara as well. Those two in particular are quite threatening. Jaden Anthony, an excellent player. I did mention the last time actually we did this, Jordan Zamora, and in fact, if you want me to go into that, I will do at the end. But yeah, that's a bit of a sore story, that one. But those three, they will be really good on the wings. And then feeding Dominic Solanke. And Dominic Solanke is one of those strikers. He's a bit of a 9.5. So to speak, what he'll actually do is he'll come back and bring other players into the game as well. So he'll set up Lerma, for example, Billing, and play it around like that and allow them to score. He's not a greedy striker at all.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Um, Question from Niall. Craig,
Yeah.
what about the pundits you spoke about on your who you spoke about on your channel about they were gonna eat cherry pie? I think actually, I think that's not more. I'll answer this one instead from Niall. Are you delighted with your close rival Southampton getting relegated?
Do you know what? I'm going to miss them.
Wow.
I'm going to miss them. In fact, the rivalry between us and Southampton isn't bad. It's not bad. And when this club were going into, we're really in trouble. And like I say, do watch, if you want to find out a little bit more about this, watch the 2 interviews we did with Trevor Watkins, because he was the chairman at the time. During the Winter Garden situation back in 1997, Southampton fans were actually putting their hands in their own pockets and donating to this football club. And I don't think we'll ever forget that. I don't think we'll ever forget that. There is that rivalry. There's that bit of it. It's a bit of a running joke. Um, but we appreciate what they've done for us. And, fair play to them. Actually, on the other note as well, because I kind of get what Noah was getting at there as well. Yeah, we had every pundit was writing us off at the start of the season. There's a guy called Tom, and in fact, I had quite a funny Twitter exchange with him off the back of this as well. But he really wrote us off. He said, "Oh, I'm not going to make another video if Bournemouth stay up." You had Thogden as well. They made a video. And of course, Gary Neville, Roy Keane, Jamie Carragher, they all predicted Bournemouth to go down.
Mhm.
I think under Scott Parker,
I actually
it
can't
would be
remember who I
justified.
predicted to go down. I
I
think
wouldn't
it
be
was.
surprised if it was us. I wouldn't be
I
surprised if it was
predicted.
us.
I definitely predicted Fulham and Leeds to go down,
Mhm.
but I can't remember who the other one who I predicted to go down. To be honest, um, I did make some wacky predictions, that's for sure. But I understand what you mean because I do like rivalries.
Mhm.
Like sometimes it's a bit boring when when your rivalries are like one is so great and one is so crap.
Yeah,
You like it to have that little bit of competition in it. Like, as much as I hate Leeds, like as we've already touched on, everybody hates Leeds.
yeah.
I'd I'd laugh like if they got relegated, but under the same breath, I think I'll miss the 6 points every season.
Well, exactly. And to be fair, that's why we want Southampton here, because they're not particularly very good. No,
Apart from the
joking
St.
aside,
Mary's.
yeah, joking aside, I think we would miss them. Southampton's main rivalry is against Portsmouth. We've got a couple of built up rivalries that have been built up throughout the years. Most notably Watford and Reading, but they're crap. So at the end of the day, they're nowhere to be seen. So um, yeah, we've created this little rivalry with Southampton, but they're more bothered about Portsmouth. And to be honest, we're more bothered about teams that actually are nowhere near us anyway.
Fair enough. Zoe's got a question for you, Craig. What do Bournemouth fans make of Eddie Howe? He did relegate you.
I don't think he did. Oh, this is opening a can of worms now. Yeah, so I'll my honest opinion of this. Um, Eddie Howe is an absolute legend. He took over from Jimmy Quinn. We'd just been beaten by Blythe Spartans of all teams in the cup. It was absolutely terrible, that game. It was horrendous. It was on Match of the Day. In fact, I remember, in I got 442 magazine afterwards, and they even made a bit of a joke about it as well, getting beat by both Spartans. I'll need to somehow dig that up. It's probably on some archive somewhere. But Eddie Howe took over the club and had no experience whatsoever. Now, we really rolled the dice at that point, because if the club had gone into the National League or the conference as it was, this club wouldn't have survived. I don't think it would have survived. Um, Eddie Mitchell, who is our former chairman, said otherwise. He said things would have carried on. I don't particularly think they would have. I think, yes, might have carried on because we might have started a Phoenix club like AFC Wimbledon or Aldershot Town or Darlington or Scarborough, one of those teams. We might have started that, but I don't think the club as it would have survived because we didn't own the ground. We had no money. We had bailiffs coming in every week to take stuff out of the club's store, which then the club somehow found money to actually buy all that back. It was a complete and utter mess. And then we had Jimmy Quinn at the helm, who was probably one of the worst managers that has ever managed this football club, without a shadow of a doubt. There is actually a funny story about Jimmy Quinn when he was here. When the training sessions were on, he used to walk the dog around the training session. So not actually watch it at all, just take the dog for a walk. But Eddie has dragged us through the leagues, and he's got players on board like Mark Pugh. Mark Pugh, of course, played in the Premier League with us for a number of seasons. I think it was 4 seasons in total that he played
Mm.
in the Premier League, but he signed from Hereford of all teams. You had Steve Cook, an outcast from Brighton. In fact, Eddie didn't sign him, but when he did come on board, he actually transformed him. Players like Simon Francis, Charlie Daniels, all these players who were also Rans at the clubs. Harry Arter was a great bit of business, signed from Woking for £40,000. You wouldn't expect that. And look at what he did. He played a big, big part in getting us to this level. And that's what Eddie was all about. He was transforming those players. That relegation season, to come on to Zoe's point, I don't think it was his fault. We was in good form actually going into the COVID period, and we'd just drawn with Chelsea. We narrowly got beat by Liverpool. We was actually 1-0 up against Liverpool for quite some time in that game, and got pegged back and lost 2-1 in the end. Of course, they won the league that season. After Project Restart started, there was two things that kicked in. Firstly, I don't think we were really prepared. I don't think we handled it. Maybe that's the one thing you could say about Eddie. Maybe he didn't really manage that part that well. That when Project Restart, happened, that we didn't go into that running. We got thrashed by Crystal Palace in the first game back. But there was a bigger point as well, and that was Ryan Fraser. And Ryan Fraser was a player that Eddie gave the chance to. He was at Aberdeen beforehand, went on loan to Ipswich, and Eddie gave him the biggest chance out of a lot of players, and he threw him into the deep end, and Ryan did well, and really performed, outperformed himself. That last season was an absolute utter disgrace from Ryan Fraser. He come out mid-season and said that he wasn't giving 110% for the team. Well, that's already bad, considering we are in. We're always going to be in a relegation battle. From the Premier League, we was always going to be in that. But then at the end of the season, when the Project Restarts happened, Ryan Fraser was out of contract. He decided he wasn't going to sign a 7-game extension because there was this move to Arsenal on the horizon, which never come to fruition, of course. As we all know now, didn't sign that. That's what relegated Bournemouth last time round. We had Hawkeye, we had the game against Burnley. I might be making a lot of excuses here, but I don't think it was all down to Eddie.
Mhm.
And I think Eddie, in that last game against Everton, which of course we won, 3-1 up at Goodison, he just looked such a dejected man. He was just gutted. It was just sad to see. Just sad to see at the end. But Ryan
Sometimes
Fraser,
there's a lot in the background that nobody knows, do they? And
it was. Ryan Fraser had let him down. There was other players that let him down as well, but I think that was the big one. And Eddie, to his credit, when he went to Newcastle, Ryan Fraser was probably panicking and thinking, "Oh my God, Eddie Howe's just walked through the door at St James's Park. I'm out the door here. I'm stuffed." Eddie Howe, to his credit, gave Ryan Fraser another chance. He didn't need to do that. He shouldn't have done that, really. But that is what Eddie Howe would do. Is he can go mad. He can really stamp his foot down, and he's quite authoritative, to be fair. But he's always, once that situation's over, moves on. Right, okay, clean slate. He did that with Ryan Fraser, and Ryan Fraser has let him down a second time. And
At
to be honest,
Newcastle.
at Newcastle. Now, if Ryan Fraser can't get motivated to play for them when they're in the position that they're in, I'm sorry, but the player is an absolute waste of time, and I would be surprised if any Premier League clubs at all really want to take a punt on him.
I think from what I've heard is that like I heard Newcastle was extending his contract, which I thought was mind baffling. But under the same breath, then I heard he was linked to the Championship and also Forest. So I
hmm
don't. I've heard multiple different things, to be honest.
Well, there was a rumor that went round that he was going to go to Hull, but I don't think he wanted to go to Hull. So I think he probably threw all his toys out of his pram at that point, like he used to. So yeah, I would send him. I would send him on loan somewhere really rubbish, to be perfectly honest.
Send
Um,
him to the League Two.
yeah, send him to League Two. Forest Green Rovers. Let Duncan Ferguson get
Send
hold of him for a
him
bit. Yeah.
Sean's got a question for you, Craig. Who do you think's coming down?
I think, who would I like to have seen go down? I would have liked to be honest, Leicester. I feel quite sad for them because of winning the league, and it seems like a bit of an end of an era for them. A bit like they've done what Blackburn have done, and not uh, they've not really taken advantage of what they had, and that's a real shame. And I'm hoping if we ever, I can't ever imagine it, but if we ever are lucky enough to have that opportunity, that we, utilize it and in the right way. You know, Leicester haven't utilised it in the right way. Neither's Blackburn. Clubs like Manchester United and Liverpool and Arsenal have all utilised it in the right way to keep themselves at the top of the game. I think Leicester are one of them. Um, the other one is a difficult one for me. I think Leeds will. But then again, they've got Sam Allardyce. This is going to be a tough one. I think Forest will be okay. They'll just get enough points to keep themselves up.
It's
They
only
have
really
got,
going to be Everton or Leeds, isn't it, really?
yeah, and we've got a big say in this. I think. Personally, I think Leeds will beat West Ham away from home. And why I say that is West Ham's focus. Of course, they're now in the Conference League final. That has got to be their number one priority. They are safe. They're safe. Sam Allardyce will go to West Ham and be really, really determined. He did well against Newcastle, to be fair. He's got that team working together. If they changed from Javi Gracia earlier on in the season, before our game, I don't think it would have been as easy for us as it was. The Leeds were rubbish when they come down here.
Mm-hmm.
Everton, I think they'll probably get. I think they'll get beat by Wolves because Wolves are at home. So that leaves it down to one game. Of course, Leeds have got Spurs and Everton have got yours truly. Um, I'm concerned by that. I'm concerned by that game, and I've been concerned about that game all season because I thought we would still be in it. And I thought, right, okay, this is going to go down to the wire and it's going to be us fighting against Everton at the last game of the season at Goodison Park for Premier League survival. Thank God we're not in that. Thank God we are safe because the atmosphere would be toxic. They'd be setting off fireworks outside our hotel until I pour water over them. Um, it would be an absolute nightmare. Um, I can see Everton beating us last game of the season, and I can see Leeds slipping up at Spurs. So I think it will be Leeds going down, but I think it's going to be very, very close. If we can beat Everton last game of the season, or get even a point against them, I think it could well be them.
Hmm.
But it's such small margins, such small margins. So I think, well, of course, Southampton are already gone. I think Leicester's dead set. For me, out of the two, if I had to put money on it, I would say Leeds, but
Okay.
only
I would
because
say
I don't.
agree. I'd agree with that. I think the bottom three, as they are, will probably be the ones who actually stay down.
Yeah.
Um, that's my opinion anyway. But what's your score prediction for this game?
Um, I'm going to go for a one-all draw, and the reason being, it's our last home game of the season. Gary
Hmm.
O'Neill will want to go out on a bang. Um, but I think Man United are in. Have got too much riding on this Champions League place. That probably doesn't do either team any good. But of course, I think you should be fine. I think you will be able to fend off Liverpool. I don't think they'll get into it. I think the top four will be as it is. Can you finish above Newcastle? It's going to be a tough ask, really. It's going to be a tough ask, especially after they demolish Brighton. But it's never say never, never say never. But um, they have got a significant goal difference compared to Manchester United. But I would say 1-1. I would say 1-1.
Mm. I'm going to go for a very narrow 2-1 win for us. I'm not confident that will happen because our away form is really bad, but I think it's probably more hope than anything. And knowing it's our last away game this season, you'd like to think that Ten Hag may potentially go all out for it, let's just say.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
no, I can understand why you say that. To be honest, Macy,
mhm,
because we are against Palace, we were on the beach. Against Chelsea, once they got us. Well, it was 1-1. I think we just let it slip that game. Personally, I would like to think that Gary O'Neill is going to say, right, okay, let's get ourselves fired up. I think, to be fair, we need to not be on the beach for that last game against Everton because I don't think this might be the fair side of me coming out here. But say for example, if instead of Leeds it was Bournemouth there, and say for example, Leeds were going away to Everton, Leeds were safe. I'd feel quite aggrieved if Leeds didn't turn up.
mhm,
If you see where I'm coming from, if we did our job and we won, but then we've gone down because Leeds didn't decide to turn up. Of course, it's not that situation; it's the roles reversed. But I would hope that we would therefore be professional enough and be dedicated enough to actually say, right, okay, we're not going to rest players. We're just going to play the game as we are. There's no pressure on us, but at the same time, for the fairness of the league.
mhm. Absolutely. I just want to say as well, thank you so much, Craig, for coming on. It's been an absolute fantastic discussion. Would you like to shout out your socials?
Yep, no problem at all. So my channel is UTCIAD AFCB. So we're on YouTube. We're actually the Talksport Fan Network channel for AFC Bournemouth now. So you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, or everywhere. To be honest, there's probably some places that I probably forgot where we are now. So many. So yeah, but do check us out on YouTube. And like I say, when we get to the 1K, I'm going to have to do that chili challenge crisps
Well,
thing, which is, I don't know. I haven't checked it since we've been talking, but I'm
I will
dreading that
literally have
happening.
a see of how many subscribers you are on. You are currently now on 966 subscribers. So you picked up 2 new subscribers since
Excellent.
watching the show, doing the show. So if you haven't already, go and subscribe to Craig just so we can watch him do that chili show. Because that would be great. Let's
And that
like,
will be before the Everton game as well. Or if it's not the Everton game, what we'll do is we'll do it some point during the summer. But yes, I'm committed to that now. Unfortunately, that's all kind of
mhm.
signed into folklore. So yeah, I'm gonna have to do it. Gonna have to do it one way. I don't really want to, but I'm gonna have to.
As well, thank you so much, Daddy, for
No problem.
watching. Really appreciate it. Ravi's gone for 2-1 for United. Reese went for 1-0 for United. Now gone for 3-0. So it looks a lot of people are confident. Always good to see you as well, Twilumber. I put your live chat link in again, so we can get you to 1K, Craig. I know that's very horrible of me, but I do want
Oh
you to
no,
get.
that's all right.
I do want you to get to 1K. Because I
Yes,
do think you're a really great guy, very, very knowledgeable. Um,
thank you.
and I do think you are one of the most knowledgeable football fans about. I really love having the conversation with you, and you do deserve every single subscriber and a lot more.
No, thank you so much, Maisie. I absolutely love coming on here and speaking to yourself, and it's something that's so enjoyable to do. Before these matches, and of course we did it earlier on in the season. We can do it again next season now as well. We're staying up, so yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure coming on here.
Always a pleasure to have you on. And Daz has gone for 1-1.
Brilliant.
I'll be next live tomorrow, straight after the game for the review show. Will I be happy? Will I be angry? We'll have to see, won't we? But thank you both. Thank you, everyone, very, very much. Thank you again, Craig, for coming on. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely evening. Good night and goodbye.
Thank you.